The first Kingdom Come Deliverance was a big success and it garnered an international audience which loves the game, and it seems like that the second one will be even bigger. But what do people think about it in its home country of Czech Republic? That's what I want to talk about in this video. What does Kingdom Come Deliverance mean to us Czechs? KCD isn't just another medieval RPG. For many Czechs, it's something much more personal. It's a game which puts our country's history on a world stage, something which doesn't happen that often. To understand why Kingdom Come Deliverance is such a big deal for Czechs, you first need to understand something about our country. The Czech Republic is a small nation in the heart of Europe, and it seems that most people don't think about us much. We are kind of like the Hobbiton of the real world. Peaceful, quiet, kind of in our own little bubble. It's not that we don't have a rich history or culture, we do, but outside our borders people just don't talk about us that often. If someone mentions the Czech Republic, it's usually because of beer, Prague, or maybe hockey. A perfect example of this is that even today, more than 30 years after Czechoslovakia split into two independent countries, many people still refer to us as Czechoslovakia, which is a bit frustrating for us. I've even had it happen to me personally, once in Italy when a shopkeeper asked where we were from, and when we said Czechia, she immediately said, "Ah, Czechoslovakia." And I've seen people do the same thing in online discussions about Kingdom Come Deliverance. Or sometimes people mistake us for Chechnya. It's a small thing, but it shows just how little attention the world pays to us. That's why when a Czech-made game like KCD becomes an international success, it means a lot. Every country feels proud when something from their culture gains global recognition, but for us it's extra special because we are so inconspicuous and it doesn't happen to us very often. It's actually a similar feeling to when we win the World Championship in hockey once in a while, which is a beloved national sport by the way. Everyone just can't help but feel proud that our small country has once again made it to the world stage. And this ties into something else, a certain inferiority complex that Czechs can't quite shake. For a large part of our history, we weren't an independent nation. We were often part of something bigger, Austria-Hungary, the Third Reich, or the Soviet bloc. Even before that, under Habsburgs, our language and culture were suppressed in favor of German influence. So even though we eventually gained independence, first as Czechoslovakia and later as the Czech Republic, that long history of being overshadowed left a mark on us. We tend to think of ourselves as a small and unimportant country no one really cares about. And even if it's not entirely true, it's a mindset that's deeply ingrained. That's why whenever we do achieve global recognition, it means a lot to us. And this brings us to one of the biggest reasons why KCD resonates so much with Czechs, the history. To people from other countries, this game is probably interesting mainly because it's a realistic medieval RPG without magic and dragons, which was a gap in the market for quite a long time. But for us, the game's story is deeply tied to our national identity. The characters and events in KCD are connected to a crucial period in Czech history, the time leading up to the Hussite Wars. Names like Emperor Charles IV, his sons Wenceslas and Sigismund, the reformer Jan Hus, the Hussites, and the legendary general Jan Žižka are not just ordinary historical figures to us. They are as deeply embedded in Czech culture as the founding fathers are in American history. We grew up learning about them in school, watching movies about them, and seeing them referenced in pop culture. For example, Charles IV, who is mentioned several times at the beginning of the first KCD, is considered one of our greatest rulers. His face is on the 100-crown banknote, there are countless statues of him, and almost every Czech knows landmarks like Charles Bridge, Charles University, one of the oldest universities in Europe, and Karlstein Castle, all named after him. There's a whole musical from 1973 called Night at Karlstein, dedicated to a legend claiming that no women were allowed at Karlstein Castle during his reign. Jan Hus, one of the earliest Christian reformers, preceding Martin Luther by over a century, is mentioned several times in the first KCD during a quest with Father Godwin and a sermon after a night of drinking. He has a national holiday dedicated to him and a large monument in the center of Prague. Sigismund, on the other hand, is perceived in a more negative light. After all, his approach to Bohemia is evident at the beginning of the first KCD, but more importantly, he is to some extent blamed for the betrayal of Jan Hus and his execution by burning at the Council of Constance. Because of this, he has been viewed as a treacherous figure throughout our history, often referred to as Liška Ryšavá, which means the red fox in English. To be more precise, Ryšavý could mean ginger, red-haired, or even rusty. I've always thought that this was a pretty witty nickname because it obviously refers to the color of Sigismund's hair and beard, since foxes are orange, but also to the fact that foxes are commonly seen as sly and cunning, reinforcing the perception of Sigismund as a devious and treacherous ruler. And just to reinforce my point, there's a Czech satirical webcomic called Obrázky z české historie, which roughly translates to images of Czech history, and pretty much everyone in our country knows it. The most iconic character in the comic, and effectively its mascot, is Sigismund, who is depicted with ginger hair, a beard and a foxtail. The author himself even adopts this persona during his public appearances. As a part of its comedic style, the webcomic intentionally misspells every word, and since Sigismund is called Zikmund in Czech, his misspelled name in the comic is Zmikund, which likely intentionally resembles the Czech word kunda, meaning cunt or pussy in English. So as you can see, he's outright mocked in our country. And then there's Jan Žižka, the legendary general of the Hussites who has statues across the country, including one of the largest equestrian statues in the world standing above Prague at Vítkov Hill. The Hussites themselves are known in our country for their war wagons, the symbol of the chalice, and their famous chant. One of the most famous Czech writers who helped popularize the Hussites even more is Alois Jirásek. From the 19th to 20th century he wrote several novels about the Hussites, the most famous being Proti všem, Against All. In the 1950s his books were adapted into a Hussite film trilogy directed by Otakar Vávra. As Dan Vávra often mentions, he isn't related to this director, they just share the same surname, but these Hussite films apparently influenced and inspired him a lot when creating Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Teď znáš nějaký filmy český, který jako mimo tuhle zemi nikomu nic nebudou říkat, ale ve skutečnosti tady jsou jako dost jiný než ty anglické filmy třeba. Jsou taky jako trošku bych řekl, že až definujou tu třeba generaci, že prostě každý je odkojený těma, jako když si představíš šestě rytíře a hrady, tak máš prostě filmy Otakara Vávry třeba, což teda je můj jmenovec, ale ne můj příbuznej.
Oni se chtějí bránit. Kdybychom je ničím nebyli, jenom tlačili koňmi, tak je na kopytech rozneseme.
Ty jeho filmy jsou vlastně vizuálně super, takže opravdu jsem chtěl, aby ta naše hra byla vizuálně tomu nějak trošku jako podobná třeba. A hlavně to dělali jako fakt realisticky, nebylo to jako fake, že opravdu ten Vávra byl překvapivě jako já, dost takový pedant na detaily.
Hej děti! Hr na ně!
A takže opravdu ten research, to, co k tomu udělali, byl jako dost mega na tu dobu. A ten film byl dost, jako bych řekl, ve spoustu směrech dost jako dobrý. A vlastně ten přístup náš je úplně stejný.
And we shouldn't forget that the master Sapkowski himself wrote a trilogy about the Hussites as well. Dan Vávra also mentions him as an inspiration for KCD.
And also, this guy was very important. Because he wrote, I would say, my favorite books. It's funny that one of the best historical books about our history was written by a Polish guy. But I really do think that Narenturm or this Hussite trilogy is really special, very well researched. And despite the fact that there are fantasy elements, it's one of the best books about this period of our history. So I really like it. It's one of my favorite books. So it was a huge influence on me, and I also learned a lot of facts from the book because it was very well researched and it depicts the daily life very well, I would say.
So as you can see, all of this was in our cultural zeitgeist for a long time, and this period in history is one of the defining moments of Czech identity and a major source of national pride. It was a time when our country stood up against the rest of Europe, successfully resisted for a pretty long time and defeated multiple crusades. The Hussites were outnumbered, yet they fought with innovative tactics and held their ground. Warhorse chose this time period for a reason. They knew how important it is to Czechs, and it's probably important to them as well. And even though Kingdom Come Deliverance doesn't get into the Hussite wars directly, it lays the groundwork for them. It shows the situation in Bohemia just before everything changed. By the way, I really respect Warhorse for putting their foot down and saying, no, we will make a historically accurate medieval game set in Bohemia. Even though every publisher told them that people won't care about it if there aren't any dragons and magic in it, and that if they want to make a realistic medieval game, they should at least set it in England because it will be more recognizable to the people around the world. The reason behind it is understandable to some extent, because almost nobody abroad knew anything about Bohemian history before KCD came out, so the publishers thought that people wouldn't care about the game. But look at Warhorse now. I think it's the ultimate example which shows that you can make anything unknown popular if it's at least a bit interesting. It just depends on how well you'll present it to the audience. Yes, it will be harder and riskier, but it can pay off way more than playing it safe. If filmmakers and Hollywood would adopt at least a bit of this attitude, we wouldn't be where we are now, with them scraping the bottom of the barrel with sequels, prequels, remakes, reboots, spin-offs and so on, just because studios are willing to bet only on established IPs. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but I don't think that Warhorse get enough credit for building up the popularity of KCD from the ground up to what it is today. So what does Kingdom Come Deliverance means to Czechs? It's not just a game. It's a rare moment when our country's history is put in the spotlight. It's a chance for people around the world to see a part of history which is deeply personal to us. And in a way, it's a reminder that even though the world often overlooks us, we have a past worth remembering. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and let me know in the comments what KCD means to you. And if you are new here and you want to see more videos about Czech history, folklore and culture, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time.